Okay, so this video is about taking linear equations and writing them in function form. And function form literally just means that the y is by itself. Now, this is going to lead into a different form that we're going to use more often. So I am going to kind of give you a couple guidelines here. So when we are ready for the other form, we're already doing it. But really, function form is just y by itself. So we've done literal equations, okay, very similar to that. But once again, specifically, y by itself. So get those other terms to the other side and just really get rid of the coefficient usually. Okay, a couple other things can happen, but most time move the x's over, divide by the coefficient of the y. Okay, so step one says add or subtract any terms that are on the same side as the y that don't have any y's in them. Like I said, usually it's going to be x's, but it could look a little bit different. But I have a positive 3x, and I'm going to subtract my 3x to move it over here. I'm bringing down a negative 4y on the left side. And we cannot just say 5x on the right because they are not like terms. So I could technically write 8 minus 3x. I'll just rewrite it. But because of what I said and how we want to kind of lead ourselves into that other form we're going to be doing down the road, that other form specifically wants our x's first on that side. So instead of saying 8 minus 3x, we're going to rewrite it with the x's first. So that'd be a 3x, but we do have to include the fact that there's a negative with it. So negative 3x. And if we want to put the 8 second, even though there is no sign in front of it, okay, we know it's a positive 8. That must mean that this is a plus 8. Okay. Now it says if there's a coefficient in front of the y, divide everything by that coefficient. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 4. I tend to do just a giant division bar on that side for now, but you could also divide just each of the pieces by negative 4. And with literal equations, we did say, hey, it's okay to leave it with that giant division bar. However, for our function form, we do actually want to know what those numbers are when you divide it. So in this case, our negative 4 does not go into negative 3 nicely. So we're just going to kind of pull out that fraction. Okay, so that is going to be the coefficient that goes in front of the x. And keep in mind that a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So our x's will have a 3/4 x. And on the other side, 8 divided by negative 4 means we're going to have a minus 2 there. And that is our function form. Okay, so just a couple other things. If your numbers don't go into each other, that should say if your numbers don't go into each other nicely, just leave it as a fraction. Simplify anything you can, whether it's numbers or signs. Okay, be careful of those signs and our integer rules. Okay, and this is going to be important for at least one of the questions on the next page. There's an invisible 1 in front of an x or a negative 1 in front of a negative x. Okay, it might be helpful to put those numbers in there so you can see part of the fraction when it comes to those. Okay, so now we're just going to practice a bunch of these. Okay, they start off easier and get a little harder as we go. So the first one, we have to get rid of that 2x by subtracting the 2x on both sides. That gets rid of it, and we just have y equals x's first. So negative 2x plus 5. Here we have constants on the same side of the y, but we're still going to move them over. We're going to add 8. We get y equals 5x plus 8. Here we have a negative 3x, so we must add 3x to move it over first. But be careful because we have to bring down a negative y. So we have negative y equals 3x minus 2. And really, we're allowed to change this sign as long as we change the sign of everything in the equation. What's really happening, and you can show this if you want, but there's an invisible negative 1 there. And it's like we're getting rid of that negative 1 by dividing everything by that negative 1. But if you just want to have that shortcut, we'll say if you have a negative y, just change the sign of everything. Okay. Because we can't leave it as negative y. Got to be positive y. Next one, we have 4x plus 2y equals 6. We need to move the x's over, so we're going to subtract them. we get 2y equals negative 4x plus 6. And now I have to divide everything by 2. Everything will divide by 2 nicely in this case, so no fractions yet. But negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2x. And then 6 divided by 2 is a positive 3. The next one, we have to get rid of negative 5x. So because it's negative, we're going to add it. So 4y equals 5x plus 8. And then we divide by 4. Okay, 5 over 4, okay, could be written as a nice decimal, but there's a reason we're going to want to leave this coefficient of x as a fraction if it is something that doesn't divide nicely. So 5/4 x, okay, and then plus 2. Okay, we don't like changing the coefficient of the x to a decimal. We like leaving fractions or just nice numbers. Next one, subtract our 3x. We get negative 2y equals negative 3x plus 7. And then we divide by negative 2. Okay, we have a fraction. Negative divided by negative is a positive, so 3/2 x. And then for the other one, 7 divided by negative 2. I know it's going to be a negative. I'm going to write it as 7 over 2. For this one, I am going to put a note. Okay, for your constants, you can write as fractions or decimals. Okay, for your coefficients, I'm going to say no decimals. Oops, sorry, too far. Okay, and G. Okay, here again, we have a -6 on the same side of the y, so we're going to add 6 to move it over. So 2y equals negative 5x plus 6. And then we divide everything by 2. So y equals negative 5/2 x. Okay, it doesn't divide, just leave it as a fraction. And then 6 divided by 2 is a plus 3. 2 more. We have a x, so we subtract x. This is the one that you guys tend to mess up. We bring down negative 3y, and we end up with negative x minus 9 on that side. And then we would divide by negative 3. Okay, and like we said, we want to have this number in front of the x. Okay, so I mean, mathematically, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So if you wrote it like this, mathematically, you're not wrong. But we want to have that coefficient, that clear number that's being multiplied by the x. And this is the case where putting that -1 in front of that x might be helpful. Because now I can see what is that fraction going to be that I pull out in front of the x. And that negative divided by negative is a positive. So I'm going to write this as 1/3 x. And then negative 9 divided by negative 3 is a positive 3. And last one, we have to get rid of the 2x, so we subtract it. But this one's a little bit different because we already have x's on the other side. So I can combine that together with the x's I already have. So we get negative 7y equals 6x plus 14. And then we divide by negative 7. Doesn't go into it, so leave it as a fraction. It's going to be a negative, so negative 6/7 x. And then 14 divided by 7 is negative 2. Okay, we're going to be doing a lot of this year. So this is a super important skill to get down. Okay, so really just be careful about those signs, and I think you'll be okay.